Okay, good morning and welcome to the City Planning Commission public meeting. Certainly surprising to me that a number of Staten Island authorizations can draw such a huge crowd this morning. But with that, Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held at the Brooklyn Borough Hall Courtroom Auditorium, 209 Gerolman Street. Today is Wednesday, January 6, 2016. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of the auditorium. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser.
Here.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delausse.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the special meeting of Monday, January 4, 2016.
So on the minutes, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the minutes of the special meeting are approved.
Thank you. Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1, 2, and 3, we have resolutions for adoption scheduling Wednesday, January 20th, 2016 for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street.
On the resolutions, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the resolutions are approved.
Thank you. The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 6. Okay. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 4, CD9, C150058, PQX, in the matter of an application for the acquisition of property concerning East Bronx Child Care Center. For a favorable report on calendar number 4, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 4. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 5 and 6. Calendar number 5, CD2, C150384, ZSM. Calendar number 6, C150385, ZSM. In the matter of applications for the grant of special permits concerning 321 and 323 Canal Street. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 5 and 6, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo. Commissioner Cantor just arrived.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Cerullo.
And
Yes.
may I have a yes vote recorded on the previous, please?
Will
Yes.
do. Okay. Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 5 and 6. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 7, 8, and 9. Calendar number 7, CD2, N150416, CRM. Calendar number 8, C150417, ZSM. Calendar number 9, C150418, ZSM. In the matter of applications for an amendment of the zoning resolution and for the grant of special permits concerning 150 Worcester Street. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 7, 8, and 9. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar number 7, 8, and 9. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 10, CD3, N160083, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 953 and 963 Edgegrove Avenue for adoption on calendar number 10. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 10 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 11, CD3 N160077 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 173 Woodrow Road for adoption on calendar number 11. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 11 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 12, CD3 N160076 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 193 Sheldon Avenue for adoption on calendar number 12. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 12 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 13, CD3 N140380 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 91 and 107 Segway Avenue for adoption on calendar number 13. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 14, CD3 N160052 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 2777 Arthur Kill Road for adoption on calendar number 14. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 14 has been adopted. Okay, Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 15, CD3 N160046 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 261 Durant Avenue for adoption on calendar number 15. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 15 has been adopted. Excuse me. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 16, CD3 N160085 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 5508 Amboy Road for adoption on calendar number 16. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 16 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 17, CD3 N160066 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 7558 Amboy Road for adoption on calendar number 17. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 17 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 16. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar numbers 18 through 22. Calendar number 18, CDs 5 and 16. C160035ZMK. Calendar number 19, N160036ZRK. Calendar number 20, C160037HUK. Calendar number 21, C160042HDK. Calendar number 22, N160050ZRK. A public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments, amendment to an urban renewal plan and disposition of city-owned property pursuant to an urban renewal plan concerning the East New York Community Plan. Notice, a public hearing is also being held by the City Planning Commission in conjunction with the above ULUP hearings to receive comments related to a draft environmental impact statement. This hearing is being held pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the City Environmental Quality Review.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today to today's public hearing on the East New York Community Plan. And I'd like to go over just a few procedural items before we begin. With the exception of public officials, speakers will be called in numerical order in which they signed up. We'll begin with the first 5 speakers in favor, followed by 5 speakers in opposition, and we will rotate between those in favor and those in opposition throughout this hearing. The hearing will proceed in this manner until all present have had an opportunity to be heard, and we'll just stay until everyone has had an opportunity, who wishes to speak, has an opportunity to speak. All persons who will speak will have a total of 3 minutes to speak, and I will also announce when we have a limited English speaker who will be given 5 minutes to speak when using an interpreter to deliver their testimony. If no interpreter is available, the testimony may still be delivered in their native language, which will be recorded, and a translation will be provided to the Commission at a future date. Speaker numbers will be posted on the whiteboard in front of the auditorium, see right over there, to help keep track of where we are, so you all will have a sense of when you'll be able to speak. Also, as a courtesy, the department will periodically post the speaker number in real time on Twitter and on the department's, City Planning Department's website. And to ensure that each speaker can be heard and transcribed accurately, I ask all of you here, whether you're in support or in opposition, to provide the same courtesy to each speaker as you would expect for yourselves. So I will announce 5 speakers at a time so you'll know where you're going to be. The first 5 speakers in support will be Commissioner Vicki Bean from the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, followed by Commissioner Greg Bishop from Department of Small Business Services, followed by Maria Torres Springer, the President of the Economic Development Corporation, followed by Commissioner Mitchell Silver, the New York City Parks Commissioner, followed by Keith Bray from the New York City Department of Transportation. And we will start with Commissioner Bean.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and members of the City Planning Commission and all of those who have come out on this important issue. I am Vicki Bean, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. As you recall, I testified before you recently on the proposal to create a citywide mandatory inclusionary housing program, also known as MIH, which will require developers in areas rezoned for new growth to provide permanent, affordable housing for New Yorkers at a range of incomes. Today, I am here in support of the proposed East New York Community Plan, which, if approved, will rezone parts of the community and include the first neighborhood-scale implementation of the MIH program, the first ever to be mapped in our city's history. Brooklyn's population has grown considerably in recent years, and East New York is often cited as one of the last few remaining affordable neighborhoods in the borough, attracting people priced out of other areas. In addition, existing residents are remaining in place as they have children and increasingly are aging in place. So East New York is growing even without in-migration. Between 2000 and 2010, the area's population increased by a rate of 11%, faster than Brooklyn and the city as a whole, which only grew about 2%. As the population grows, the increased demand for housing is putting pressure on the area's housing supply. We must create new affordable housing if we are going to relieve the heavy demand that is driving up East New York rents. Between 2000 and 2013, prior to the announcement of any rezoning, median home values in East New York increased by over 100%. Median rents increased by approximately 26% in East New York over the same period, compared to just 16% in all of Brooklyn. The median household income in the neighborhood is about $33,000. But in order to afford current asking rents in East New York, one would need to earn at least $44,000 for a one-bedroom or $56,000 for a two-bedroom apartment. Indeed, over two-thirds of East New York households are already spending more than what the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development defines as affordable. Many of you have seen a statistic quoted in the press that says that 50,000 East New York residents are going to be displaced as a result of the proposed community plan. That figure, taken out of context from the draft environmental impact statement, has been grossly misused. What the report actually says is that 50,000 people are already at risk of displacement. Because so much of the housing in East New York is in small buildings, there are 50,000 people in East New York today who do not live in housing that is regulated by a government agency or rent stabilized, and because of their low incomes, cannot afford the increasing rents I described just a moment ago. Those people are at risk of displacement as pressure continues to rise on rents because the demand for housing is simply outstripping supply. The zoning proposal before you today is not a trigger for displacement, it is a preventative measure. It has been crafted to ensure that new development is only permitted along the major commercial corridors, Atlantic, Fulton, Liberty, and Pitkin, that currently contain very few residential units. Residential areas on the side streets are not being rezoned to allow for greater density, thereby ensuring that the existing low-scale character of the neighborhood is preserved, and ensuring that the rezoning will provide no incentive for owners to change the nature of the housing. On the avenues, let me just wrap up, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So on the avenues, the proposal will require that any new development set aside at least 25% of the units as permanently affordable housing. And that's the critical issue here, is that by providing affordable housing and by increasing the supply of housing, we will take the pressure off those rents and thereby prevent rather than trigger displacement. This proposal, I think, is critical to provide the affordable housing that this neighborhood and that the city needs. It's also critical to reduce the growing income inequality that plagues our city. So I'm happy to answer any questions about our anti-displacement efforts, our anti-harassment efforts, or the effects that we project of the proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner. Questions for Commissioner Bean? Commissioner Delauze.
Good morning, Commissioner Bean. Thank you for being here. And, first, I just want to acknowledge that you, the HBD team, and certainly the administration has taken steps in the conversation in East New York that are unprecedented.
Thank you.
I think the major concern that we have heard thus far, and I think that we're here later on today, really has to do with the fact that right now the conversation for the mandatory inclusionary housing targets the area median income, the lowest at 60% of area median income, whereas the area median income in East New York is closer to 40% of AMI. And I know that the proposal is to use city subsidy to drive down the affordability. Can you talk more about that? Because I think the main concern is that there'll be a mismatch between the number of units that would be produced as a result of city subsidy versus the ones that potentially are at risk of being lost at their affordability levels.
Absolutely, so thank you. So first of all, I want to say about the mandatory inclusionary proposal that the 25% aside would be at an average of 60%, so there will be lower income units because to average at 60 there will be some lower income. But I think the critical thing about the mandatory inclusionary proposal is that that is what is required of developers. What that allows us to then do by forcing developers to provide housing at that levels is that it frees up subsidy that we can then use to make those apartments even more affordable. So we have committed in the housing plan that we developed after a great deal of consultation with the community. We have committed that the first units that we subsidize will all be 100% affordable, and they will be 100% affordable under the terms of our extremely low income program, which requires that 10% of the housing be at 30% AMI, 15% of the housing be at 40%, and I can go through those incomes and translate them, but that it targets those extremely low and very low income households. We've had a long record over the last year alone. We have we've financed either the construction or the preservation of 1,300 units, and many of those were at those extremely low and very low income units, down to $18,000 for a family of one, for example.
Thank you. Ms. Levin.
Commissioner Bean, I'd like to take you up on your offer to discuss anti-displacement measures. I think it's vividly clear to the Commission that displacement pressures are a major concern, particularly in this area where so many of the units are unregulated in smaller buildings and occupied by very low-income New Yorkers, the kind of people that we want to keep in the neighborhood. So we heard at the review session on Monday, we've had a number of suggestions, particularly from the coalition, about anti-displacement measures that could be put in place. Particular enthusiasm for the kind of procedure that's available in the Special Clinton District that I happen to be pretty familiar with, requiring a certificate of no harassment before changes in the building are allowed. We heard from Deputy Commissioner Hernandez at Monday's review session that you've certainly understood that concern, and that your intention is to your desire is to meet the intention of the anti-harassment zone, but through other means. Could you please elaborate on how you are going to take care of, try to relieve the market pressures on those unregulated units?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. And certainly, it is not our intent to displace anybody. We are trying to provide, for all of those of you who are holding up the signs, we do not want to displace anybody. We want to provide affordable housing that can keep people in their neighborhoods. But I want to separate out two different concepts. One is displacement, people having to leave because they cannot afford the rents in a neighborhood, and the second is harassment, right? Harassment, what I'm defining as harassment is landlords cutting off services, not doing repairs, calling people repeatedly, all of those kinds of things. So let me address both in turn, because they are actually different kinds of problems and require different kinds of solutions. In terms of anti-displacement, the best way to prevent displacement, which is caused by rents going up, is to meet the demands for housing and to increase the supply, right? To increase the supply across the board, but also to increase the supply of affordable housing. And this proposal allows that increase in supply by upzoning those critical corridors that I mentioned, and commits us to provide an enormous amount of affordable housing as part of the housing that is getting built, both through the mandatory inclusionary program and through our commitment of our own subsidies, right? So in terms of displacement, the other issue about displacement is preserving what is there now. And about 43% of the housing in New York, in East New York, is under some sort of government restriction already. We are taking every step we can to make sure that every unit of housing that is now rent restricted stays rent restricted. And we have rolled out and are rolling out a variety of programs to try to bring even more housing under those rent restrictions. And my Deputy Commissioner of Preservation will be here later to talk in detail about some of that. But for example, one of the programs that we're most excited about is our Green Preservation Program that offers landlords who are not now rent restricted, help with energy conservation measures, water conservation measures, which drive down their costs if they will agree to keep the housing affordable. So that's our anti-displacement efforts. In terms of anti-harassment, Harassment in rent-regulated apartments right now, we have we've multiplied by 10, we've increased by tenfold the legal services that are available to tenants who fear that they are being harassed or who are being evicted. We have formed a anti-harassment task force with the Attorney General, with the State Department of the Tenant Protection Unit, with the Department of Buildings. We are proactively investigating and targeting landlords who we think may be prone or may be engaged in harassment. We are doing inspections to see if there is illegal construction, if there is harassment by demolition, all of those kinds of things. And we've started having a mobile van out in the neighborhood so that tenants can very easily let us know of anything that's going on. And my Deputy Commissioner for Enforcement and Neighborhood Services will be here later also to explain some of the things that we're doing in terms of code enforcement and that kind of thing. So why won't the Clinton program work? Because harassment is an issue in rent-regulated housing. So much of the stock in East New York is not rent-regulated, right? And so there the emphasis has to be on anti-displacement as opposed to just anti-harassment. Okay?
Mr. Knuckles, followed by Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. One of the criticisms that we've heard throughout the process thus far, we've heard and read, is that this approach is too broad in scope, that it's a one-size-fits-all approach to rezoning, as opposed to a more incremental, parcel-by-parcel rezoning. What's your take on that particular criticism?
Well, so first of all, I think to say that this is a one-size-fits-all ignores the years of engagement with the community and very fine-grained look at this particular neighborhood and its needs. But more directly to your question about sort of more lot by lot, the way to get more housing built and the way to keep costs down is to provide certainty. And if everything has to be done as a one-off, there is no certainty. Developers will choose to develop elsewhere, investors will invest elsewhere, and my costs will go up if every single project has to go through a long process of approval and engagement. That's why New York City has always really focused on broader-based kinds of land use review proposals in jurisdictions that have a more one-off, one by one. The costs are astronomical and things just don't get built. That will not avoid displacement, that will cause displacement.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for coming in for your testimony. I have a question with respect to indirect displacement. You had mentioned, that it's been misconstrued. The reading of the DEIS has been misconstrued to some extent. And I wondered if you could speak to that and the concerns that have been raised, particularly by the coalition, about the mismatch between sort of the new affordable housing units and the ability of existing residents to subsequently, if rents rise and they are displaced in some way, to be sort of first in line for these new units, and what policies or mitigation measures might be in place as part of this rezoning, and perhaps others you're considering to address that issue.
Okay, thank you. So that's a great question, and people often fear that the affordable housing that's built in their neighborhood will not be accessible to them. So half of all units of any new affordable housing or any gut rehab that requires that leaves preserved apartments empty, half of those go to community residents. And recently, through the Housing Connect, through our online lottery system, we fill every single community seat that there is in all of our lotteries now. People still fear either they won't qualify for the lottery, or their incomes will not be exactly, the band that is required. So we've taken a number of steps to try to address that. One is that people do have trouble documenting their incomes because the sort of the federal income guidelines are based upon this notion that everybody has one W-2 and it's all very easy, but that, of course, is not anybody's life. So we are working very hard to provide counselors and housing ambassadors who can work with people in the community to document their income, to get the documents that they need together, and so that they can put their best application forward. We've translated Housing Connect and all of our materials, and we'll be rolling that out in the next couple of weeks online into the 7 major languages, so it's much more accessible. We are providing financial empowerment counselors to help people repair credit, that kind of thing. And we've standardized the criteria that can be applied. What we found in our analysis of the marketing that was going on is that some developers were imposing requirements that, you know, were not standard and were disqualifying people who should not be disqualified. So we have standardized the criteria that can be applied. For example, we do not allow somebody to be disqualified solely on the basis of their credit rating, right? And that's a major step, and we think will make a huge difference. So we're doing a lot to try to make the process more accessible and more successful for a wider range of people, working with people directly in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron, and then Ms. Delahoo's.
Thank you. There's one large city-owned site in this rezoning, but perhaps, and so therefore we know the city controls that. Are there ways to gauge the demand, and is there an outreach to have an understanding of how, if this is rezoned, this could be done quickly so that there really is an immediate new supply of affordable housing?
So we have identified about that piece of land and about 6 other clusters. We believe we can, and some private land where we are already in discussions with the owner of the private land to put affordable housing there. So we've committed to get 1,200 units of affordable housing out the door within 2 years of the rezoning being passed. So,
Ms. Delahoo's.
Commissioner Bean, can I just circle back a bit on the on Commissioner Levin's questions about the anti-harassment special district? I know here in East New York that 5% of the housing stock is rent stabilized and 30% is rent regulated and government assisted. So, I mean, I guess the assumption is that on the government assisted there's very little risk, although I don't know what percentage of that is owned by for-profits, and that over time, once the regulatory agreement expires, how the view on that might shift the thinking about the necessity or the usefulness of an anti-harassment special district. I don't know if you can comment on that.
I don't have the statistics on how many are nonprofit owned versus for-profit owned. Kim Darga, my Assistant Commissioner of Preservation Finance, will have a better handle on those details. Sorry, I can't keep all those numbers in my head. I do know that over the past few years we have preserved, I think, almost 900 units and re-upped their affordability restrictions, et cetera. But she can give you the details on that.
I guess the concern is that, just since the rezoning was announced, there's been significant increase in prices in the neighborhood, and the for-profit owners, even of affordable housing, over time could be incentivized to no longer keep their units within regulation over time. I guess the other question I had, just going back to the piece you said about the commitment, about the 10% at 30% of AMI and 15% at 40% of AMI. What percentage of the East New York community would that cover? Who's there now? What percent would still be left out at those affordability levels?
Well, so of the first, 1,200, for example, that, we're talking about, all of that would be, or most of that would be at 60% or below, but it would be at that 30, 40, 50% level. So 40% of 1,200 is, right, 300, 400 for starters right out the gate. So, and then the rest is at 50, 60% AMI, so that would meet some of the needs of the community as well. Over time, we expect that, and the environmental impact statement expected that about 6,000 apartments would be built. Of course, we don't control that if it's not on our land. We have committed that at least half of that, about 3,500 units, will be 100% affordable. So that's 3,500 units.
I'd like to follow up on Ms. Deluz's question as well. I mean, the draft environmental impact statement, as you say, projects that more than half of the ultimate potential units here will be affordable. But in the foreseeable future, knowing this market as you do you anticipate that there will be significant market rate housing here, or do you expect in the next several years that most of the housing, if not all of it, will be affordable? And if so, how your subsidies will affect that affordability?
So our analysis suggests that for the next few years, 100% of it will be affordable, because in order to build new construction in East New York with prices, construction prices and land prices and operating costs being what they are, the market does not support completely unsubsidized development. So we will be subsidizing the initial developments, and where we are subsidizing, they will be 100% affordable. So we expect that in these first few years, everything is going to be 100% affordable. Some of it at that very low incomes that I indicated, and the rest of it in the 60% AMI type of range. So eventually, I think the market will catch up or costs will adjust. And so we expect that eventually we will start to see market rate development, and then there we will be getting the 25% affordable, permanently affordable through the mandatory program.
So in the early years, beyond the first 1,200 apartments that you've committed to, you expect even beyond that, the next tranche, whatever it will be, is likely to be 100% affordable as well.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, in this past year, we either financed the new construction or preservation of 1,300 units. We expect that we will continue to proceed at that pace. And over the next few years, we would expect to see not just that 1,200, but as many as another, up to 3,500 in the initial years of the plan.
Thank you. Mr. Dweck.
Commissioner, your projections of 100% affordability over the next few years, can you share with the Commission your cost basis for your analysis on the land prices on the buildable square foot that you project over the next few years to make it?
I mean, I'm loath to ever talk about land prices, because if I say something about land prices, the market reacts. And so the way that I am going to answer that, if you don't mind, is to say that even when we modeled land prices at 0, we did not find market rate development could support the cost of new construction, even with land prices at 0. So we're seeing a range of land prices. I think the best way to describe, where we think, what we think an acceptable land price is in developments like this is that our term sheet allows no more than, and we always try for much less than, $30 a square foot.
Buildable.
Yeah. Does that?
Are there any other questions for Commissioner Bean? Thank you very much, Commissioner Bean. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, everyone will have an opportunity to speak. And before we hear from the next speaker, I just have a very, very brief announcement that there is a car. I feel like I'm at Madison Square Garden here. A BMW black 2015 BMW plate number FZC8367 that is blocking the borough president's car from getting out. So if you are the owner or the possessor of that BMW 2015 car, I suggest that you slink out of here as anonymously as you can and move your car so the borough president can go about his business. So thank you very much. The next speaker is Commissioner Greg Bishop from the Department of Small Business Services.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Promise you that's not my car. Good morning, members of the City Planning Commission. My name is Greg Bishop, and I'm the new commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. At SBS, we seek to foster a thriving, equitable city by connecting New Yorkers to good jobs, creating stronger businesses, and building a fair economy. Today, I will discuss the economic development investments SBS is making in East New York, developed together with our local community-based partners. These investments were informed by extensive community outreach, including 13 community workshops and more than 10 meetings to date with key stakeholders. After my testimony, I'm happy to answer your questions. Based on community feedback, SBS launched Neighborhood 360 East New York to identify customizable, place-based commercial revitalization programs and services. SBS is working with 3 community-based partners, Cypress Hills LDC, Highland Park Community Development Corporation, and the LDC of East New York to conduct a commercial district needs assessment of the Fulton, Atlantic, Liberty, and Pitkin Avenue commercial corridors. SBS will work with these partners to implement strategic interventions to help neighborhood businesses adapt to change and sustainability and build the organizational capacity of local community partners. SBS operates 7 NYC Business Solution Centers across the 5 boroughs that offer services like financing assistance, MWB certification, and more for the city's more than 220,000 small businesses. SBS Division of Business Acceleration helps businesses by coordinating license and permitting process and making the regulatory environment more efficient. In East New York, SBS specifically works with the Business Outreach Center of New York, BACnet, one of 7 industrial business services providers, to provide tailored assistance to industrial and manufacturing businesses. Informed by community feedback, SBS is launching several efforts to better serve businesses in East New York. We will launch a fast-track growth venture program to help businesses access capital, identify growth opportunities, build sales strategies, and adapt to changing markets. On January 20th, SBS and Cypress Hills LDC will host an open house to provide additional information on these services and register business owners for the class beginning in March 2016. The class will be offered in both English and Spanish. To help businesses negotiate fair leases, SBS is offering commercial lease workshops and one-on-one assistance with pro bono attorneys. SBS is identifying community partners to host commercial leasing workshops in East New York this spring. As part of the city's Small Business First initiative, SBS, in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Operations and more than 15 city agencies, is implementing 30 recommendations to improve the city licensing and permitting processes. SBS is actively organizing Small Business First events in East New York with several partner city agencies. Lastly, we are pleased to announce that SBS will open a Workforce One Career Center in East New York, where employers can access free recruitment services to find qualified talent, and job seekers can receive employment services, including job placement, skills trainings, career advisement, and job search counseling. SBS held the first of several sessions for the center with 14 community-based organizations. Finally, we have much work ahead of us, and I believe we have an extraordinary opportunity to leverage the efforts of our partner city agencies and local community-based organizations on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Questions for Commissioner Bishop? Ms. Efron.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a question that is really about broadband internet, and I ask you, because I understand from some of the literature that's out there by the coalition that some of the smaller businesses within the commercial district don't have access to broadband internet. It's obviously a bigger issue for the residents if we ever hope to bridge the digital divide for all of our New Yorkers, especially our younger ones. But I wonder if you could speak toward efforts or possibilities of broadband internet for businesses, if not for the greater community as part of the rezoning.
So on that question, we are not actually actually connected to the broadband efforts. What we do is actually help businesses figure out how to actually run their businesses more efficiently. I believe there might be another speaker who will be able to answer that question, but that's not in my area.
Thank you.
Although I do believe broadband is important.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Good, so the Workforce One Satellite Center is clearly an important piece of this. As part of the non-regulatory elements of this rezoning that I think are important. How do we help people, how do we alleviate poverty, help people increase their incomes so that they can afford to also remain in a community that's improving. And given the importance of that element to this, I wondered if you could speak to SBS's previous experience with these career centers and what sort of, maybe it's anecdotal impacts and outcomes that you've seen that, would help the community understand, what the benefits really of this kind of center are or might be for the people in the neighborhood?
Sure. And my Deputy Commissioner, Jackie Mallon, will be testifying later to actually go into more details. But just anecdotally, the workforce centers really connect individuals to job opportunities. We have several centers across the city. This center, and actually through an initiative called Hire NYC, will be focused, and we're working with local community partners to identify the workforce needs of employers in the East New York community and ensure that the workforce is actually and has the skill sets necessary to actually obtain those jobs. If they do not have the skill sets, then we will have training available to train them to then actually get those jobs. Citywide, we've done that, and I think we will see the same service delivered in East New York.
So do you have any sense of utilization rates? Like how many residents really take advantage of a Workforce One center? Is this something that, we can look forward to help local residents?
Right. If you're talking specifically, I can just give you in terms of system-wide. We have placed over 20,000 individuals over the years, upwards to 30,000, depending on the year. And so, obviously, we don't have numbers for the East New York Center. We're still working on actually finding a location. But you can actually, Jackie Mallon can go into more details about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Ellis.
Commissioner Bishop, thank you for being here. I'm just, this is both a question for you and then a question for Maria Torres Springer later. Obviously, one of the potentials of this rezoning is to really promote economic development. And I think, kind of following up on Commissioner Ortiz's question, the importance of that is ensuring that local residents can benefit from that. And can you talk a little bit about how many new jobs we project might be created as a result of the rezoning, and then what sectors those might be in, and then plans that either SBS or EDC or other appropriate city agencies might have to specifically ensure that local residents have the training and knowledge necessary to access those jobs?
Sure, and I think I'll leave the new jobs number to my colleague, Maria Torres Springer. I think what we at SBS, we want to make sure that when the jobs are created, that we have a workforce that actually has the skill set to actually get those jobs. So in terms of the sectors that we're focused on, and this is through a program that we have, we've honed in on a couple sectors, including technology, construction. Obviously, we know that in East New York, there's a large industrial base, so industrial and manufacturing. And we also are looking at some other areas, including retail, to really ensure that either those employers have a skilled workforce, and certainly we want to make sure that our training is in line with the skill sets that they need.
So with respect to that, I think the draft environmental impact statement indicates some 3,400 new jobs would be created through this plan. Many of them would be retail jobs. And the experience of the Workforce One centers is that, I asked the question, is it a valuable resource to identify local residents who can then fill local jobs, particularly jobs, well, both retail jobs as well as jobs that potentially will be in the adjacent IBZ.
So if I answer the question, if I understand the question correctly, yes, it is important that we work closely with local employers to identify the jobs that they have. And in the past, we've done that a number of times with other employers, and we don't. And I actually expect that to happen in East New York. Now, retail jobs are obviously one of the areas we want to focus on to make sure that they're quality retail jobs. But we want to also focus on the other living wage jobs, including the industrial and manufacturing sector.
Thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner Bishop? Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
The next speaker is the aforementioned Maria Torres Springer, President of the Economic Development Corporation. Welcome, Ms. Springer.
Commissioner Bishop is much taller than I am. Good morning, Chairman Weisbrot and members of the City Planning Commission. My name is Maria Torres Springer. I'm the president of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. We at EDC are dedicated to strengthening the city's economy and increasing economic opportunity for all New Yorkers by creating good jobs and strengthening neighborhoods throughout the 5 boroughs. We are pleased to be working on the East New York Community Plan, which we believe achieves these same goals. I have a complete testimony that I've submitted, but in the interest of time, we'll hopefully summarize in 3 minutes. We at EDC have been coordinating closely with the Department of City Planning and our sister agencies over the past 2 years to help design the recommendations before the Commission today. Over the course of many months, we've spoken with residents and stakeholders in the East New York community to better understand how we can work with local partners to accomplish the goal of supporting good jobs in this dynamic neighborhood. The plan is a byproduct of these discussions, and we believe it includes a robust economic development strategy for East New York that builds upon the neighborhood's best assets: its transit access, tightly knit urban streetscape, heritage as an industrial job center, its diverse people, dynamic entrepreneurs. We will continue to work closely with our partners at DCP and SBS to coordinate our strategies and deliver on what we've heard from residents is a priority, and that is access to quality local jobs. I'll talk more specifically about the East New York Industrial Business Zone, which has been a real focus of EDC's efforts. The IBZ is an important cluster of well-paying, accessible jobs for local residents. It's home to 250 businesses, 3,000 jobs, with companies specializing in steel, metal fabrication, transportation, woodworking, other trades. Crucially, the East New York IBZ is not being altered or rezoned as part of the East New York Community Plan, and we really want to build upon the IBZ's strengths to grow existing jobs in the community and attract new innovative companies that offer real career pathways that are accessible to local residents and workers. In November, the mayor announced a bold new industrial action plan outlining ways we will protect and grow industrial spaces that allow New Yorkers to create, transport, repair, maintain goods that are vital to our city. These tools will be brought to bear in the East New York IBZ, and they'll build upon other investments EDC has made. To give you just a little bit of background on that, since 1997, we've sold 33 small city-owned vacant parcels in the IBZ, resulting in over close to 700,000 square feet of land available to support the expansion relocation of over 20 industrial businesses. This has generated approximately $33 million in private investment and development and has helped create and retain close to 800 jobs. More recently, we revamped the 4 East Brooklyn Business Improvement District gateway signs with a new design and lighting repairs, signaling our dedication to really improving the public realm and the conditions for businesses and residents. And since last summer, we've been working on a comprehensive planning study of the IBZ in coordination with a local council person, the East New York LDC, the Business Outreach Center Network, Cypress Hills LDC, and other local stakeholders. The study will look, and I'll just wrap up, at current land use and in infrastructure conditions, market trends, local business priorities to make the IBZ stronger. As a part of this study, we'll develop a framework really that will provide specific recommendations to grow and strengthen the IBZ and ensure that it's better connected to residents and the local workforce. And we look forward to sharing the results of that study over the course of the next few months. Finally, I'd like to, and I can talk more should there be specific questions about it, but part of our efforts here to make sure that we're connecting citywide policy initiatives that we've announced to make sure that we create opportunity for local residents and businesses. And that includes the Hire NYC program that will do just that on the workforce development side, as well as new MWBE programs to ensure that the city's contracting reflects the great diversity of business owners in this city. We are very much humbled and pleased to be part of this process, and we certainly look forward to working with the community and with all of you to continue to improve upon the plan. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Springer. Questions? Ms. Delaus, then Ms. Efron.
Thank you for being here. I'll just follow up with the question that I asked Commissioner Bishop. If you could maybe drill down a bit more about specific programs that EDC is going to be involved in that are targeted to the sectors that exist now in East New York, and ones that we think might be coming potentially as a result of the rezoning. That would be helpful. And then the other question I have really has to do with EDC's role and thoughts about the proposed changes to the manufacturing zoning outside of the IBZ.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our work has been concentrated in really looking at the industrial business zone, which has about 250 businesses, 3,000 workers. When you look at the breakdown of those workers in East New York, it's primarily transportation and warehousing, as well as manufacturing. And then you put that side by side, what we're seeing are really more trends that are citywide in terms of the industrial sector. And after decades of decline, we're actually seeing really good growth in certain subsectors, in particular the construction of buildings, warehousing and storage, specialty trade contractors. We think that given the current makeup of businesses in East New York, there is a great opportunity to build in particular on the strength of the construction industry and specialty trade contractors. A lot of those types of firms are already located in the IBZ. And so in order to do that, as part of the IBZ planning study, we are really looking at ways to ensure that we're improving the overall public realm of the IBZ, that we're identifying additional space to increase the supply for the types of industrial firms that can continue to grow and move into the IBZ, and looking at the services that those particular type of businesses will need in order to grow. As importantly to your question earlier is to make sure that we are aligned as an administration so that residents of the area can connect to those jobs. And so the investments that SBS is making with the Workforce One Center, the additional investments in training, it is our opportunity really to ensure that we are creating the types of training programs and the Workforce One mechanism so that East New York residents have the opportunity to train for and connect to jobs that will grow because of the administration's overall efforts to grow certain subsectors of industry in the IBZ.
Go ahead.
If I could follow up, I mean, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering if there are specific targets for local hiring that the administration is thinking of putting out or has put out that maybe I'm unaware of, and if there are ties between the public investments that your agency, or I should have asked the question for Commissioner Bishop, are making and to local hiring targets?
So the Hire NYC program is an unprecedented, in my opinion, set of initiatives to make sure that anytime government pulls a lever, whether that is providing a subsidy, disposing of land, letting a contract, that we are connecting targeted populations to the Workforce One system. And so having a Workforce One satellite center in East New York allows us to make sure that we're doing that type of outreach, talking to employers, ensuring that East New York residents are connected to that system. And what we've essentially established is for different types of investments, EDC, HPD, other public contracts, so any investment in the area above a certain threshold, employers today must engage with the public workforce system. So that is what I believe is a sea change in how we ensure not just that there's good outreach to local residents about jobs, but we're using every lever that the city has to give New Yorkers a first shot at those opportunities.
Just as maybe a follow-up to Ms. Deluz's question, you as a former commissioner of the Department of Small Business Services and very well acquainted with the Workforce One centers, is there a correlation between where those centers are located and the individuals who are referred for jobs from and training from those particular neighborhoods?
On one hand, the system is designed to be a universal system because one of the things that we found is that New Yorkers, they can travel to different opportunities. And so the system was set up so that there are different hubs across the city, but they all share the same job orders. Having said that, the presence of a local center, one, certainly increases visibility so that, and we think that's really important, that residents know that there is an employment center in their neighborhood to connect them to jobs not just associated with the rezoning and development in the area, but really across the city. And then another thing that's also really important is the proximity to employers. And so when we think about where the East New York satellite center might be, and I know we're working on the location, its proximity to the IBZ also ensures that the staff of that center have real-time, constant, systematic feedback from employers, and that, of course, ensures that the demand of jobs, that there is a robust set of job opportunities that are available to East New York residents and really to all New Yorkers.
Thank you. Ms. Efron.
Thank you. It's very exciting to hear about a renewed commitment to manufacturing, in particular to the IBZs, and I hope that the relative proximity of East New York's IBZ to the airports will capitalize on both the new investment from the federal and state level in the airports to help benefit the manufacturers and ultimately the residents of East New York, and also perhaps an export strategy in the next round. But my questions really are about a building that was mentioned in the review session that perhaps EDC is working on to jumpstart new manufacturing efforts in the IBZ, and also just a follow-up question on the broadband internet access.
Yes, thank you for your questions. Let me take the second question first. So we are certainly believers that fast and reliable broadband access is critical for all types of businesses. What we've done, what we launched several months ago, was a program specifically for underserved, from a broadband perspective, industrial areas called Connect IBZ, where we have made available, working with partners, high-speed commercial broadband networks, and that has been in Southwest Brooklyn, Long Island City, North Brooklyn, and the Greenpoint Williamsburg IBZs. As part of the comprehensive planning study that I mentioned earlier for the East New York IBZ, broadband is definitely a big issue that we are looking at to make sure that all the companies within the IBZ have the opportunity to take advantage of technology in order to continue to grow and thrive. And so everything that we've learned from Connect IBZ, we will make sure to bring to bear as we identify the specific broadband strategy for East New York. And then the building on Pitkin Avenue, that you mentioned before. We call it the East New York Industrial Building, and I can provide the specific address. But it's a critical property, in my opinion. There are tenants, subtenants there now, but it is underutilized. It's about 30,000 square feet. And we think because we may not own, there may not be a ton of city-owned assets within the IBZ, and so for those assets that we do own, we certainly want to make sure that we don't squander that opportunity, and that we're making a $1.5 million commitment that's already in the budget, for instance, in order to upgrade that building. And what that essentially does is increase the supply of modern industrial space, in particular for light industrial. And as the Commissioner Bean mentioned earlier, one of the things we really believe can help with any concerns about potential long-term displacement. I know one of the commissioners had a question earlier about that, to the extent that there are changes that are going to be made to MX, what happens to those businesses. One of the tools that we have is to, given our assets, increase the supply of industrial space, and we intend to do that and offer, because we are a double bottom line type of company, the types of rents that allow for those businesses to afford to be in the area. Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. Hi. I guess stepping back from the IBZ as sort of an opportunity for jobs and thinking about how residents can access jobs citywide as well, and maybe, point me to someone else if you're not the right person to answer this, but, part of this is also the transportation improvements that, are part and parcel of how do we help people access jobs more easily. I know that as part of the rezoning, there's going to be some transportation improvements. There have been requests for, transportation improvements for similar reasons in the borough president's recommendations. How do you, as EDC, what's your sort of take on that and the importance of that as an economic development strategy?
I mean, we as an agency, we certainly very much believe in ensuring not just that we are adding to transit options across the city, because that is a good thing for residents, but because it really has an economic development nexus. And as part of the One NYC, the Mayor's Blueprint for Sustainability, as you might know, we set out some fairly ambitious targets for what it means in terms of a certain number of New Yorkers being within a 45-minute commute of a good job. So overall, that is important. We have across the city, for instance, with the citywide ferry service that we are standing up, shown a real commitment to ensuring that there, as development happens, we're thinking about what those transit nodes and transit connections can be. In this area, of course, with different neighborhoods, a different set of challenges, and so we, like we always do, more than happy to work with all the transportation agencies to determine what those right interventions are. And as those investments get made, back to the point about local jobs, and those capital dollars are spent, that the construction opportunity, construction jobs that are available now through Hire NYC, we're able to connect residents to those specific job opportunities. The other thing to note from just a transportation point of view, and it relates to the question earlier, is that because of how the Workforce One system is set up from a kind of hub and spoke model, we do have a major industrial transportation hub as part of the airport system, and so this satellite will work very closely with that hub, and it just allows us to make sure that transportation in all its different forms, in terms of people's commute to work, in terms of the types of jobs in transportation, that we are checking every box to ensure we create opportunity for people in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Springer? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Commissioner Mitch Silver from the Department of Parks and Recreation. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and members of the City Planning Commission. I'm Mitchell Silver, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, and thank you for allowing me to testify in support of the East New York Community Plan. All New Yorkers need access to green and open space. Working from this principle, the East New York Community Plan seeks to preserve and enhance our parklands and community gardens. Also, to improve access to parks and work with local residents to create new recreational and open space amenities. In the rezoning study area and within a half-mile radius, New York City Parks operates 35 park properties, and our Green Thumb division provides support and licenses to dozens of community gardens. First and foremost, the East New York Community Plan preserves and respects our park resources. Currently, the city is moving forward on over a dozen East New York park properties, including new athletic facilities in Cypress Hills Playground, Highland Park, Sperendeo Brothers Park, Saratoga Ball Fields, Thomas Boylan Park, and enhanced play areas in MLK, Schneck, Belmont, and Rudd playgrounds. Secondly, the East New York Community Plan is a positive end result of when the city strengthens and elevates the planning function of nearly every city agency and engages in true community involvement. Throughout the year and a half planning process, we've heard from local residents, used metrics and need-based assessments to develop capital strategies that will enhance East New York's parks and playgrounds. Moreover, we've worked in a close relationship with our sister agencies, including the Department of City Planning, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Education regarding pedestrian improvements near park entrances and the expansion of the schoolyard to playground program by creating new or converting existing schoolyards to community playgrounds. Finally, the $1 billion Neighborhood Development Fund, or NDF, helps fulfill Mayor de Blasio's pledge to work with communities to invest in the infrastructure they need to thrive as their populations grow. In looking for ways to make local parks more dynamic, we've identified an underutilized 1-acre asphalt section of City Line Park as an opportunity for creating new recreational space. Moreover, we've heard from the East New York residents say they want more quality open space, including athletic fields for youth sports. By funding improvements to City Line Park, the open space closest to the Dismore Chestnut development site, and the adjacent Transit Tech High School, one of the area's largest public schools, will accommodate both existing and future open space needs in this growing community. With the NDF allocations, communities can now have confidence that the infrastructure investment of nearly $7 million for City Line Park and Highland Park, as promised in the East New York Community Plan, are fully funded and will be delivered in coordination with the anticipated development. Later this winter, NYC Parks will lead a community design process for the new playground at Highland Park, and in early spring, we'll seek community input on the recreational facilities plan in City Line Park. In the spirit of transparency and inclusion, New Yorkers can now learn more about these capital projects and others as they develop by using our capital tracker available at the NYC Parks website at nyc.gov/parks. Thank you for allowing me to testify before you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Questions for Commissioner Silver? Mr. Knuckles, followed by Ms. Ortiz.
Commissioner Silver, thank you for your testimony. I don't know what your employment needs are at parks, but I'm just wondering, and I understand civil service regs as well, but is there any connection between your possible employment needs and the workforce presence in East New York, and making a link between those two elements?
Well, we're an agency that has many seasonal opportunities that particularly they're hired during the high end of the season, starting in spring and then ending in the fall. Those are always available on an annual basis, so that's an ongoing opportunity we have for anybody that wants to work. And clearly, with the number of parks that we have in the East New York area, we're always looking for hiring, but there are some seasonal employments. Beyond that, we're an agency that fluctuates between 7,000 and 9,000 employees, and so we're always offering opportunities for people to gain jobs. We also have a POPS, what's called a POPS, it's a Park Opportunity Program. We work with both job training participants that once they go through the program for 6 months, we work to try to get them full employment, but we also have the seasonal opportunities I had mentioned. So there are job opportunities in the Parks Department, and we encourage people to go to our website and to see if there is a job that fits their skill set.
Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you, Commissioner. You started your testimony by mentioning a whole host of improvements And I presume all of those are within the rezoning area? or-
Within a half mile of the
Okay,
rezoning area.
within-
So there are 2 proposed new projects, and then there are about 12 existing ongoing projects within a half mile, either within or within a half mile of the study area.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And those will happen regardless of the rezoning?
12 will happen regardless of the rezoning. There are 2 that, as we're working with Department of City Planning, will be enhancements as a result of the rezoning.
Okay, and those are being funded by NDF?
That is correct.
One of them is a 1-acre city line park.
That is correct.
So I have a question. I have some familiarity with sort of the parks and capital improvements in parks. Is there, aside from the capital investment needed to improve these parks, is then there a commensurate commitment from parks to maintain these over time? Because I think maintenance ends up being an ongoing issue.
Well, we're making vast improvements. The answer to the question is yes. Anytime we have new open space resources coming online, we work with OMB to make sure we have the adequate resources. But at the same time, we have a unique way of looking at our mobile crews. About 2/3 or more of our parks are handled by mobile crews, not fixed crews. And we're always optimizing our schedules to ensure that our parks and open spaces are maintained. And just starting earlier this year, we shifted to a 7-day cleaning crew schedule. So now we have parks cleaning parks and playgrounds 7 days a week as opposed to 5 days a week. And so by tinkering with the schedule, we make sure that we maintain our parks. And we get very high ratings if anyone goes on our website. The cleanliness and safety of our parks have been improving year over year.
So there would need to be some sort of increase from ONB to some extent. We just don't know how much at this point.
We have that. That's just on our citywide system. We manage about 1,900 parks and playgrounds, and so that is an ongoing conversation. We do have that on a regular basis as we open up new parks or expand new parks with OMB. But I just want to make sure we also look to optimize and make sure our mobile crews on how we send them out are more efficient. So we actually do both. Look at new employment to take new staff resources to take care of our parks, as well as optimizing how we schedule and maintain our parks through our fixed crews,
And do you
mobile
have a
crews.
sense, I may have read it somewhere, or there's a lot of material, but about how much the capital commitment is for City Line, or has that not been identified yet?
I know it's $7 million for both. I'm estimating it's about $5.2 million for City Line, and it is $1.7 for the Highland Park. We're reconstructing a playground in Highland Park.
Thank you.
Ms. Deluz, and then Ms. Levin.
Commissioner Silver, thanks for being here. I'm just, is that $7 million, does that actually fully fund the capital needs for those parks?
To convert the 1-acre asphalt lot to a recreational area is $5.2 million. That's just for that capital project.
Okay, I mean, I think in some people's memories, past rezonings under previous administrations, there were commitments about parks. Bushwick Inlet Park comes to mind. And I think we want to make sure that, should this move forward, that the mistakes of the past are not recommitted.
Well, just to be clear, for this effort, we work very closely with the Department of City Planning to develop a capital strategy, and those projects are funded. What is very different, that was not the case in the past rezoning, was this neighborhood development fund. So as we put forward that capital strategy, we now know that there are funds in place to go ahead and make sure that these projects are in fact developed.
Ms. Levin?
Commissioner Silver, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'm looking at Community Board 5's recommendation to us, and at the very top of their positive recommendations, the things they affirmatively want to see is reclaiming the old traffic court building for an indoor recreation facility for community use. And the need for indoor recreation facilities is also echoed in the coalition's materials that they provided to us. What opportunities are there either at that particular site or elsewhere to provide indoor recreation opportunities in this neighborhood?
Well, we'll certainly take a look at that. This is the first time I'm hearing about that recommendation, but we'll certainly take it back. We have roughly about 35, 36 recreational facilities throughout the city. We'll see which one is closest to this community, but it's something we'll certainly take a look at.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, sorry, just a quick follow-up. So the $7 million set aside from the NDF is connected to the rezoning. So if there's no rezoning, there are no improvements to City Line and Highland Park. Is that
No, that's not necessarily the case. As you know, that we have over 1,900 parks and playgrounds. Working with our borough commissioners, we're on a regular basis working with elected officials and the community to identify what some of those resources are. In terms of the increased density and through the planning process, these were some of the opportunities that were identified. So we have, over a 10-year period, close to a $3 billion capital plan. We're always looking to enhance our open space and park resources throughout the city. There's a particular focus on what we call a community park initiative zones, those communities that have been underserved. So these projects that have been identified will always remain on our list for capital improvements, but as we work with the community in conjunction with city planning for this East New York Community Plan, these were some of the opportunities that were identified and needed.
Thank you.
Just to clarify that, I think, as I understand what you said, Commissioner, is that one thing that the Neighborhood Development Fund does, and which is very much tied to specific rezonings, is that it guarantees, in a way that has not been guaranteed before, that funding will be there for very specific improvements.
Correct.
And which is not to say that if a rezoning doesn't get approved in a particular area, it might not at some point be funded, but it wouldn't have the same guarantee that this Neighborhood Development Fund offers. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. As we worked with city planning, we looked very carefully at the open space resources as the population increases. You look to acquire, you look to expand, you look to improve access to certain of the amenities, and as we work with the community, these were the two opportunities that were identified.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification.
Ms. Efron.
I just wanted to point out that this is a neighborhood that actually has a pretty extraordinary treescape along its main streets and side streets, so much so that it feels as if a good portion of the million trees perhaps were planted there. It's really more just a comment that I hope Parks will seize the opportunity to both maintain those whenever possible and expand upon it. How wonderful it would be if a rezoning of East New York really was one of the greenest neighborhoods in our
Right.
city.
So just in 2015, our forestry division, we planted well over 500 trees within a half mile of the study area, and we continue to plant more trees in the area. So I agree with you. There are all the benefits of having an incredible urban forest and tree canopy in the neighborhood, and we'll continue to expand that in the East New York area.
Any other questions for Commissioner Silver? Thank you very much, Commissioner. Next speaker is Keith Bray from New York City Department of Transportation. And just before Mr. Bray testifies, the next 5 speakers will be in opposition: Michelle Neugebauer, Jamel Burgess, Adrian Weibgen, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, Paula Crespo, and Bill Wilkins. And I would ask all of the commissioners here to please speak into your microphones so that the transcript and the recording of this can pick up your words of profound wisdom. Mr. Bray.
Thank you. My name is Keith Bray. I'm the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner for the New York City Department of Transportation. DOT has been engaged with community members in East New York to understand their priorities for improved street safety and connectivity through both the East New York community planning process and earlier the sustainable communities in East New York. We are actively working on projects in this area which respond to the community's desire for safer streets and more efficient transportation options, and I would like to briefly highlight some of them for you. Broadway Junction is a major transit hub serving thousands of buses and subway passengers daily. In 2013, we proposed a significant project to improve circulation at this station. The project includes a redesign of the sidewalk and bus unloading area on Van Sinderen Avenue outside of the Broadway Junction subway station, which is currently under construction and scheduled for completion this year. This project will reduce conflict and congestion on Van Sinderen and make it safer and easier for riders to transfer between the subway and bus and improve accessibility to Callahan Kelly Park. Working with the MTA this spring, we're also going to be consolidating the B12 and B25 bus stops and layovers at Fulton Street and Georgia Avenue, and also on East New York Avenue and Alabama Avenue. This will be adding new seating, shelter, and pavement markings to these and other nearby streets. As part of this proposal, we will be converting several streets from two-way to one-way operation to allow for buses to better circulate in this area and the layover as well. It will reduce dangerous conflicts between buses and private vehicles and pedestrians. We heard from community members for many years that they would like to see improved bicycle infrastructure in the neighborhood. Since 2013, we have implemented a bicycle network in Brownsville and East New York, adding bike lanes to Pitkin Avenue, Boylan Street, and others. These routes were developed in close consultation with Community Boards 5 and 16, and we held many public workshops to fill community input and provided updates throughout the process over the past 4 years. We will continue to work with the community to expand this bike network. Looking forward, we are dedicating tens of millions of dollars towards a major reconstruction of 2.1 miles of Atlantic Avenue, almost entirely located in East New York. This project is one of our 4 Great Streets capital projects identified by DOT in New York City, the others being Grand Concourse in the Bronx, Queens Boulevard, and also 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. This project was initially funded by Councilman Delon with dedicated $2 million to it in 2013, and we've taken that effort and moved it forward. The Atlantic Avenue project is split into 2 phases. The first phase is a 1.2-mile stretch of Atlantic Avenue between Georgia and Logan Street. Phase 2 is a 0.9-mile stretch that's between Logan and Rockaway Boulevard that actually extends into Queens. These sections were split into 2 phases as traffic volumes on Atlantic changed dramatically at Logan Street due to the JFK Belt Parkway traffic to and from Conduit Boulevard, resulting in different street conditions on either side of Logan. Briefly, just want to say that one of the reasons we're looking at this stretch of Atlantic Avenue is because between 2010 and 2014, there were 1,658 injuries in this corridor, 79 severe injuries, and since 2007, 10 fatalities. This makes it one of the highest stretches of roadway in the city for injuries, and one of the reasons why we felt that it needed to be addressed, and the Great Streets would do so.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Questions for Mr. Bray? Ms. Efron.
Sorry, at the review session, we heard a little bit about the capital plan for Livonia Station. Can you talk about,
So,
it's MTA, but okay, maybe somebody from MTA is coming. I withdraw my question.
Nope.
honestly, I don't have much to say, unfortunately, on that one.
Any other questions for Mr. Bray? Ms. Deleuze.
I know this is slightly outside of the study area for East New York, but since you raised the conduit area, there's the area between the conduit that a lot of people treat as parkland, but I believe it's under DOT authority. Perhaps not.
Yeah, I think that's actually, that is parkland, the area between Conduit Boulevard. I don't think that's DOT's property.
We will clarify
can
that
clarify.
between DOT and Parks Department to see exactly whose jurisdiction it's under.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bray?
Wait, one quick question.
Ms. Ortiz.
My apologies. So, with respect to Atlantic Avenue, the improvements on Atlantic Avenue, you mentioned those, preceded sort of the consideration of the rezoning. To what extent has the rezoning and the thinking that Atlantic Avenue will now contain a school and will contain, many more residents, how has that changed the design? Because I anticipate, now you're trying to accommodate many more people than you had originally intended.
So we're going to add some traffic calming elements to Atlantic Avenue. There's going to be a lot of neck downs we're going to be adding to this project that makes it easier for pedestrians to cross over Atlantic. On top of that, we're going to add trees and make a fuller median in the middle. And we found out, not only in New York City, but just in traffic in general, when you add trees in the middle of streets and you give a street sort of a boulevard characteristic, it actually works to calm traffic in and of itself, beyond anything else. So we're going to be adding that as well to Atlantic, so it would make it seem a more calmer residential park-like boulevard street.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bray.
Thank you.
So I apologize, just before Ms. Neugebauer speaks, the Deputy Borough President, Diana Reyna, is here, and Deputy Borough President There she is, okay. And I also want to note that we are, I know, also joined here by staff from many other elected officials, including Council Member Espinal's staff and Controller Stringer's, the Stringer staff and others, and I'm sure many of them will also be speaking. Good morning,
Good morning. Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Deputy
Chair.
Borough President.
Thank you. My name is Diana Reina, and I'm the Deputy Brooklyn Borough President, here to testify on behalf of our Brooklyn Borough President, Eric L. Adams. Together, we represent 2.6 million people in Brooklyn who call this great borough home. I want to thank all of you city planning commissioners for giving me the opportunity to provide comments at this public hearing on East New York Community Plan. On December 30th, of last year, Borough President Adams submitted a uniform land use review procedure recommendation to disapprove with conditions of an application submitted by the New York City Department of City Planning to amend the zoning of approximately 200 blocks in the neighborhoods of Cypress Hills, East New York, and Ocean Hill. The response was issued following months of dialogue with local stakeholders and community activists, including a public hearing he held in this courtroom of Brooklyn Borough Hall on November 23rd. Borough President Adams has recommended a number of measures to ensure the proposal achieves meaningful creation and preservation of affordable housing, including greater resources to combat resident displacement, as well as increased efforts to build very low and low-income units on previously unstudied lots. Additionally, his recommendations address the need to document the city's commitment to the holistic community development outlined in their plan, including the establishment of a post-approval follow-up body with local representation. Recognizing the added rental pressures that the proposed rezoning will have on existing residents living in housing not subject to rent regulation, Borough President Adams has expressed the importance of achieving permanent affordability for affordable housing units created through the East New York Community Plan beyond the proposed 25% requirement of any new residential development with more than 25 units. In particular, he has focused on achieving agreements of permanent affordability at the city-owned Didsmore Chestnut Urban Renewal Disposition Site and scattered new infill home ownership opportunities program, as well as the city-financed former Chloe Foods site. Borough President Adams has called for accountability to put in place and sustain the anti-displacement initiatives the city has proposed in their East New York Community Plan, including code enforcement by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and funding for free legal representation in housing court for all tenants facing harassment. He has also expressed concern regarding the potential for displacement on additional sites identified through an analysis by our office, which may be attractive for future development. Efforts he proposes include the potential implementation of anti-harassment areas, creation of tax incentive options for small property owners in return for indexing rental unit lease renewals to increases by the Rent Guidelines Board, and cataloging of government-assisted housing with expiring affordability requirements to proactively protect affordable housing units. In addition, Borough President Adams recommended implementing further measures to address the current and potential future displacement of local residents. He has outlined a proposed commitment of 50% preference for new area housing to residents of community districts 5 and 16, inclusive of former residents who were previously displaced. I'd like to just address, in particular, the anti-displacement strategy also includes zoning text amendments to encourage deeper and more flexible bands of affordability in new housing, a study of proposed residential district to better match the allowable zoning. I want to express the need for working with clergy to engage the faith-based property development initiative that has been spearheaded by this office. And we also want to stress the strengthening and preservation of East New York industrial business zone, inclusive of promoting new urban agriculture uses and financial industrial development fund to be created to actually achieve the purposes of creating new spaces, similar to the CB1, Williamsburg Greenpoint Industrial Development Fund, through its rezoning, which was the impetus of creating new spaces for displaced businesses. In conclusion, as the stewards of this great city, we must demand what will not be beneficial only to the environment, our local and regional economy, and our quality of life, but an East New York community plan that will benefit generations to come. It is why we will continue to hold accountable the upheld agreements of any administration, this and the ones beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam
Thank
Deputy
you.
Borough President. Questions?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, a question, pardon me.
Sorry.
Ms. Ortiz.
You know, one of the things we're grappling with also is, you know, what happens without the mandatory inclusionary housing. And, you know, there's mention in your testimony that there are added rental pressures that the proposed rezoning will have on existing residents. I wondered what the borough president's concern. I mean, Brooklyn is seeing a tremendous amount of displacement and gentrification, you know, without MIH. And is there, you know, what's his take on what's happening here and what would happen absent a set aside? You know, would folks see increases in rent absent these actions? Is that your experience? Is that what you anticipate?
That is exactly what is happening throughout the city, especially when we talk about rezonings in any particular community. Right now, the speculation of land is imposing a lot of pressure on property owners to sell, knocking on doors. Unsolicited offers are coming every day. Properties in a very desirable neighborhood like what would be Cypress Hills is experiencing what would be a two-family home being knocked on every day, to the point where they're feeling the pressure of having only the option to sell. That does not protect the tenant. And soon enough, what will happen is that the new property owner will eventually harass the tenant out or buy out the tenant, eventually leading to what would be the coupling of properties that are assembled to build what would be greater density, which would create a market rate environment, leaving out what would be not mandatory affordable housing.
So is it the borough president's position that he's not necessarily against the, you know, a set aside per se, but that there, you know, other issues here at play?
There's always other issues. We just have to have the foresight to understand what those issues are and create an environment that includes all those issues so that we are able to address them before they happen. There's no mechanism to really take in a lot of these dynamics that are occurring as we speak. There's no one database that's taking on what would be the information of Doña Maria Ortiz, who's living in 322 Chestnut, and lo and behold, a year from now, she will not be there, and she will not know whether or not she qualifies for affordable housing a year from now. Thank you.
Just to clarify, there's no, this proposal doesn't propose greater density on the side streets or in Cypress Hills. It's really focused on the main avenues.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Oh.
Mr. Chair, just to
Yes.
make sure, despite the greatest effort on behalf of city planning to allow what would be greatest opportunities on main avenues, we just want to make sure that we're all mindful of the harassment issues that are occurring beyond the main avenues.
Indeed, and
Thank
and
you.
I think you heard from Commissioner Bean, and I think we'll hear from others later on from HPD. Obviously, it's a major concern of all of us, and a concern that is occurring irrespective of this proposal, but a concern I think all of us really
Sure.
have to address. So,
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, now to the 5 speakers previously mentioned, starting with Michelle Neugebauer. Welcome, Ms. Neugebauer.
Well, thank you. Good morning, City Planning Commissioners. My name is Michelle Neugebauer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation and a proud member of the Coalition for Community Advancement, Progress for East New York and Cypress Hills. We are a coalition of community-based organizations, houses of worship, residents, and small business owners. And collectively, we represent and serve 50,000 residents of Cypress Hills and East New York. We are surely legitimate stakeholders with deep roots in the community. We have 5 major areas of concern about the East New York plan. 1, there are not enough deeply affordable housing units proposed in the plan. 2, the anti-displacement measures currently in the plan are insufficient. 3, service needs of current and future residents are not adequately addressed. 4, economic development aspects of the plan need to be strengthened. And 5, there are few accountability mechanisms in place to ensure that the commitments made today are kept for the long term. So just to go a little bit more in depth on all of the points, the affordability of the proposed housing to be built does not match the incomes of current residents. The city has stated that 50% of the housing to be built will be market rate and 50% will be affordable. In East New York, market rate housing might as well be luxury housing. It is totally unaffordable for current residents. To date, only 1,200 units of the proposed 3,500 affordable units have been identified, and even those do not reach the deepest affordability levels that we need in our community. We need more deeply affordable housing and consistently have advocated for 5,000 units to be constructed. The coalition has put forth well over a dozen proposals for strengthening anti-displacement policies, including implementing an anti-harassment zone in East New York. We need action and commitment on these proposals. We have documented the severe shortage of school seats that already exists in Cypress Hills and East New York and will only be exacerbated by the rezoning. We need additional commitments beyond the 1,000-seat school that has already been promised. And we need commitments on all of the critical services that make a neighborhood livable, healthy, and strong. That is why we are proposing a special purpose district that would support the development of new services throughout the lifetime of the East New York plan. The economic development aspects of the plan that need to be strengthened include committing additional resources, preservation of manufacturing outside of the IBZ, stronger anti-displacement strategies to retain the over 500 plus small mom and pop businesses on the impacted corridors. And of course, we need strong local hiring strategies resulting in living wage jobs in construction, manufacturing, retail, and other East New York growth sectors for East New York residents. Furthermore, too many communities have been promised great things by private developers, city officials, only to realize that pledges made at zoning hearings, promises made to council members, and even agreements worked out by the city are rarely enough to secure meaningful community benefits. That is why, and I'll wrap up, that is why we have urged the city to modify its plans to enshrine more commitments within the zoning text itself, and are committing to asking you to commit to high-level coordination, accountability, and an evaluation plan. At a baseline, we need to know in 15 years that East New York is a more equitable, sustainable, healthy, and economically strong community than it was in 2016, and that the current residents were not displaced because of city actions, or at the very least, we should have the courage and openness to measure it, say what really happened, and report back on a regular basis to the community. That's why we are here today to urge you to vote no on the city's East New York plan unless the community's alternative plan is implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Neugebauer. Questions? Starting with Ms. Delos.
Michelle, it's good to see you here, and I just really want to thank you and the coalition for the extraordinary work that you've already put in. This is really helpful information that you all put together in response to the DEIS. I think it raises a number of concerns that we're absolutely taking very, very seriously. You mentioned your plan, obviously, and I know that there's been a tremendous amount of effort put into it. Could you briefly highlight the major differences between the plan that the coalition has put forward and what is currently put forward by the city?
All right, well, hands down, I think the major differences are the affordability levels, the number of deeply affordable housing units that are proposed, and the anti-displacement strategies.
And the 5,000 units that you're all calling for versus the up to 3,500?
500, and at deeper affordability levels. I just want to mention that we have a very high percentage, it's over 40% of current neighborhood residents earn under 30% of AMI. And I think the city's proposal is that 10% of the units proposed would be for under 30% of AMI. So it's a dire need for the lowest income people to be housed in East New York.
And can you comment also just about we've heard a bit already about the pressures around speculation that have happened?
Yes, I think the Deputy Borough President mentioned some of it on the small homes end, but we're also seeing a tremendous spike in the sales of industrial buildings and at very high prices in the rezone area. So there are industrial buildings being listed at $150 a square foot on Atlantic Avenue, which would never get to, so either those buildings will lay vacant for many, many years and will never get the affordable housing that, that the city has in the plan now, which is one of the main fears of the neighborhood, that speculation has already been so rampant that the development sites at affordable rates will not be there.
Ms. Levin.
Ms. Neugebauer, I want to echo Commissioner Deluz's compliments. The materials that you all have made available to us throughout this process have just been extraordinarily helpful, and I know that it stands on the shoulders of a ton of work that has gone on in the community to get it all together and to reach a consensus and to figure out what you want to put out publicly. So it's really an impressive and very valuable piece of work. Seems to me our biggest challenge here is grappling with market forces, and you've heard from various city agencies about the need to do something, because if we don't do something, the market's going to only make these situations worse. So I have two questions about your recommendations in the face of those market forces, and the first is you're advocating for an additional 1,500 units of affordable housing. No, 1,400, some more. Do you have more sites? Where could that be accommodated? And secondly, on the zoning mechanisms that would address anti-harassment, the argument is that that doesn't work in unregulated units. Is that something that you agree with?
Okay, so remind me if I forget one of your points. So on market forces, we've heard this again and again, that the market is really hot, that gentrification in Bushwick and in other parts of the city is happening, you know, absent a rezoning, that this is our opportunity to lock in more affordable units. So we acknowledge that in other neighborhoods, gentrification is happening without rezoning, but we know that it's happening, so we have an obligation as a city, as a community, to try to slow down the market, to calm the market, to mitigate the speculation that's going on, and to really try some of these anti-displacement policies that have been tried in other municipalities. On the anti-harassment zone, even though we don't have tens of thousands of rent-regulated apartments, the thousands that we do have are just as important to us as the number of affordable units that are going to be built. So we think of anti-harassment, anti-demolition, legislation, either citywide legislation or written into the East New York housing plan, the East New York rezoning plan, will go a long way in terms of the owners of those multifamily buildings knowing that, no, it cannot happen in East New York and Cypress Hills.
Don't even think about it. Additional sites for the...
Additional site. I think the borough president, in his recommendations, had some very on-point and creative ideas around that. But there are also some sites that have been built speculatively that really need additional pressure to bring them into an affordable redevelopment plan, like Arlington Village.
Thank you.
Ms. Neugebauer, I also want to compliment you and the coalition and Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation on your very thoughtful work here. And particularly to Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation for its work in the community over many, many years. I know that you have recently undertaken a project with the city at Pitkin-Berryman to build an affordable housing project. Can you talk about the affordability?
I think that project is really a model for what the rezone could be. So we are building on Pitkin Avenue 60 units of affordable housing with a ground floor fine fare supermarket, and we are reaching very deep levels of affordability. We were able to do that because the parcel was upzoned, and the city and Commissioner Bean, to her credit, was really a hero with this project in terms of allocating tax credit financing for Pitkin-Berryman, but it's a project that will really promote healthy living, access to healthy food. We're going to work with the operator to have community gardenings, to sell produce, fresh produce that's produced actually in the neighborhood. So I think, the rezoning of that parcel with deep affordability.
What is the affordability depth? What is the range there?
Is it 10% to 60? It's the Ella term sheet and plus.
I mean,
more deeply affordable. The city actually allocated project-based Section 8 for 8 of the units, which is golden.
Yeah, so I want to get back to that in a second, but essentially, that affordability is what I believe HPD has committed to on the first 1,200 units in East New York. Isn't that correct?
No, well, the Section 8.
I'm sorry?
The Section 8 vouchers will also bring it down even further for those 8 apartments.
But the city, just to that point, the city has a limited number of Section 8 vouchers, which it doesn't.
And we're advocating for our community that we get as many resources as we possibly
Every
can.
community wants Section 8 vouchers, we certainly understand that, but the city doesn't manufacture the Section 8 vouchers. So one of the challenges, that the city has, obviously, and I know
to go to the deepest levels,
is to go below essentially 30% of AMI, because it's you're an expert in this area, it's very difficult to maintain ongoing rents and subsidize them at income levels below that level without Section 8.
Yeah, and we're all involved in the advocacy movement to continue to pressure the federal government to get back in the business of affordable housing.
Right, and I think
with you,
there's probably not a dissenter in this room that doesn't dissents from that view. But I guess my point is that given what the city has available to it, the affordability level that you've achieved on Pitkin-Berryman is essentially what, at the very least, the city is offering in its first 1,200, committed to in its first 1,200 units that it proposes in East New York. Is that?
Well, we know we could do even better if the resources were available.
We all could do better if we had more Section 8 vouchers, I grant you that. But given what we have, and essentially the city
We
is
need to
really
go deeper, and we need more units. Commissioner.
sorry?
We need to go deeper, and we need more units, Commissioner.
Indeed, but again, I'm just in terms of what the city itself can do. It's pretty much committed to matching what they have done in partnership with you. Is that a fair statement?
As I said, we can do better.
And I grant you that, we've all been seen this over many, many decades in the city where promises on particular public investments that the city committed to weren't kept. But I do think that, and I don't know if you've seen anything like the proposed neighborhood development fund, which in effect funds public commitments up front so that those commitments.
I guess what we're asking for in the accountability mechanisms.
I'm sorry?
We're asking it for, in terms of the East New York plan, that there's a real mayor-level office of neighborhood development that's going to coordinate all of the city agencies throughout the 15-year lifetime of the East New York plan, and that the commitments are upfront in terms of what are the budget resources, what are specifically the number of units, the timetable, if it's going to be an exploration and investigation, what's the timetable for that, and that we're going to hold all of the players involved in the East New York plan accountable for the long term.
You heard Commissioner Bean testify that in the foreseeable future, not in the immediate future, the likelihood is that virtually all the units that get built in East New York will be affordable because they will require HPD subsidies under this rezoning. Sometime in the future, perhaps market rate housing will be maintainable. But do you agree or disagree with her assessment about that?
No.
Okay.
We don't disagree. The 1,200 units are much appreciated, but we would like even a lower affordability level even within that 1,200, if feasible.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi.
Hey, Leslie.
Thank you for your testimony. One question, is there anything in the rezoning as it stands right now that would prevent the deeper levels of affordability that you've achieved in the current project that you mentioned? Or subsidy?
Subsidies, the Section 8 vouchers I just mentioned.
As we've mentioned, that's a resource issue. I'm saying, with respect to the sort of regulatory framework we're putting forth, you would, under this regulatory framework,
I mean, this is a very tough project that we just closed on, that I don't know if other private developers who weren't not-for-profits would go for. I mean, essentially, there were no developer fee involved. It's a very low per square foot rental cost for the supermarket. So I think just the parameters of that, replicating it would be really tough.
But for the funding, but there's nothing in the current rezoning that would prevent what you've done there?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Encourage it.
Any other questions, Ms. Neugebauer? Thank you very much. Oh, Cheryl. Pardon me?
I had one question that's somewhat unrelated to the housing part, but your coalition did put together some information about the broadband internet, and it was early in the process, and I'm wondering if that's still a priority. I realize what your 5 priorities are of the coalition, but is...
I mean, it's something we're concerned about, particularly we've heard in the IBZ, that internet goes out all the time. We've experienced it, so...
Well, we have heard testimony that the IBZ is covered. I'm more concerned about the neighborhood residents in particular, but I just wondered if this was still of concern, or
it's a concern, but it's not a top priority.
Thank you. Now, any other questions to Ms. Neugebauer? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jamel Burgess. Welcome, Mr. Burgess.
Good afternoon, City Planning. Commissioners, my name is Jamel Burgess. I'm a lifelong resident of Cypress Hills, East New York. I am a youth organizer, and I stand here today with the Coalition for Community Advancement. I will testify today on the importance of ensuring that East New York rezone guarantees that 5,000 residential rental units are affordable to the current residents of East New York. That is rents to be pegged for 30% of annual household income of current residents who now have a median household income of $34,000 a year. Without commitment to deep and permanent affordability at this level and at this scale, the rezone will result in mass displacement. For this reason, we are urging you to vote no in the East New York's plan unless it includes the community's alternative plan for housing affordability. Within the proposed rezone area alone, there are a total of 5,246 households in severe need for affordable housing. Some of these families include entering homeless shelters, rent burdens, over 50%, and those living in severe overcrowding. While we acknowledge that the city has set aside funding and identified sites to build 1,200 subsidized units over the next 2 years, we have not seen serious concerns as to where the other affordable units will be sited, given rampant real estate speculation and recent spikes in the land values, and whether private owners will sell at reasonable rates to make deep affordability possible. We urge the city to use all tools at their disposal to secure additional sites so that 5,000 units of deeply affordable housing can be built, and we urge the Planning Commission to reject the current plan. One of the reasons we urge the Commission to vote no, unless the city's DEIS fails to acknowledge that the potential for significant residential displacement and the city's proposed migration strategies are insufficient to counteract the effects of displacement pressures that the rezone is likely to generate or accelerate. The city's DEIS makes the false assumption that creating these units will prevent displacement of existing residents. If the new affordable apartments are not affordable for the people who currently live in East New York, then they will not meet the local housing needs, and we can't reasonably be seen as preventing the displacement of current residents. A second reason we urge the Commission to vote no is that we believe that the city's plan overstates the number of affordable units likely to be generated in the rezone, relying too heavily on the use of HPD subsidized that are voluntary and do not offer permanent affordability. The proposed mandatory inclusion housing policy fails to guarantee a significant number of units affordable to very low income people. Instead, I guess my time is up. Instead, unaffordable to most current residents of East New York. And the coalition urges the city to create at least 5,000 units of deeply affordable housing. That would be almost 80% of the construction units, assuming that the rezone produces approximately 6,300 new units. The rents for these 5,000 residential units must be pegged to income levels of current neighborhood residents. Specifically, propose that the plan for HBD subsidize the sites provide for 20% of units at 15% AMI, a maximum income of $12,585, an income level that the city's current plan leaves out. 20%, not 10% of units at 30% AMI, 10% of units at 40% AMI, and 50% of units at 60% AMI.
Thank you.
And to close, we call on the Commission to vote no unless the city commits to the creation of 5,000 residential units that are affordable to current East New York residents and are regulated to remain affordable for 60 years or more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Burgess? Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Next speaker is Adrian Weibgen. Am I pronouncing, how do I pronounce that?
Adrian Weibgen.
Weibgen, pardon me, thank you.
It's okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Adrienne Weibgen, and I am an attorney at the Urban Justice Center Community Development Project, and we're working with the Coalition for Community Advancement to support equitable development in East New York. The proposed rezoning is going to create a huge risk of displacement, and the preservation strategies that the city has proposed so far are completely inadequate. The city needs additional anti-displacement strategies for both regulated and unregulated tenants, and it should not proceed with the rezoning at all without these strategies. We urge you to vote no on the city's East New York plan unless the city adopts the coalition's proposals as alternatives or mitigations. East New York has long been a home to many low-income and middle-income New Yorkers, including people of color and immigrants. But we are concerned that the city's plans risk displacing thousands of low-income people, as has happened with many of the city's past rezonings. East New Yorkers do not fear change. They fear that they will not be around to benefit from the changes that are coming. The city says that rents in Brooklyn are rising anyway and that there's a risk of displacement with or without the rezoning. But the city does not address the fact that the rezoning will create a greater risk of displacement by inviting huge amounts of new housing. Just by way of comparison, the rezoning will result in a population increase of over 50% as opposed to a no action condition where the population increase is estimated to be 4%. And it just doesn't make sense for the city to say that the risk of displacement would be equal with a 50% increase with many of the residents at income levels far beyond the current residents versus a 4% increase where a substantial number of the new residents would have similar income levels to today's population. Because of all of this, preservation has to be at the heart of the city's plans, and the city claims that it is. But legal services alone, and I am a lawyer, so I'm not against legal services, but legal services alone are not enough to break the profit motive that will drive landlords to harass rent-stabilized tenants in the community, of whom there are about 3,000, and HPD subsidies will not help tenants in unregulated apartments and small homes. The city must adopt additional mitigation strategies to combat risk of displacement, and I will highlight two from the coalition's proposal. The first is the anti-harassment zoning text provision, which you've already heard about before. It is currently in place in the Special Clinton District and in Williamsburg. The process would require landlords seeking certain permits from the Department of Buildings to obtain a certification of no harassment before proceeding, and landlords who have harassed tenants should not be able to receive building or alteration permits unless they agree to build new permanently affordable housing. This is a method that has worked elsewhere and it could work here. It would not solve the entire problem, but for the 3,000 rent-stabilized tenants in the community, it would be a significant added protection. And the fact that it will not protect everyone is no reason not to protect those that it would help to shield from displacement. Second, the second proposal is a good neighbor tax credit, which will support tenants in small owner-occupied homes who are currently essentially completely not addressed by the city's plan. Many live-in landlords in the community. They give low-income tenants a break on their rent, and they don't charge what they could charge in terms of the market rate because they want to support their neighbors and people who have lived in their homes for a long time. But as land values and property taxes rise, it's going to become harder for those landlords to maintain the low rents that they're giving tenants today. So a good neighbor tax credit could help protect unregulated affordable housing, which is a significant amount of the housing in the community, as many people have noted, by providing a tax break to landlords of 1 to 4 family homes who offer 1-year leases to low-income tenants at below market rates. Just in conclusion, dramatically upzoning a low-income community with huge amounts of unregulated housing is a dangerous gamble, and the city should not play games with people's lives. If the city cannot or will not do more to ensure that the residents of East New York will be able to stay and will be able to benefit from the rezoning, it should not rezone the community at all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wybeck. Questions? Ms. Deluz.
Hi, thank you for being here. Obviously, there's a lot of support for what you're having to say in the audience. I'm just wondering, we've obviously heard from the administration earlier today that the intent of the investment from the Legal Services Fund and from the other unique programs, which quite honestly this administration is putting out things that the prior administration didn't take into consideration as it related to either displacement or harassment. Why isn't that enough in this case?
So again, legal services are extremely important, and we are grateful that the city is making that investment in these communities, but the problem is that legal services are not going to break the profit motive that will cause landlords to continually harass rent-stabilized tenants, and the punishments that are just not severe enough to deter them from doing that, even if they are brought to court successfully. So that will help to stem the tide, but the only thing that can just break that profit motive altogether and make landlords say it's honestly just not worth it to harass rent-stabilized tenants out is if they know that they carry the risk that if they harass tenants and they're found to have harassed tenants, then either they're not going to be able to get their permits to renovate their building or to demolish it and build it up new, or they will have to set aside a significant portion of what's built new as permanently affordable housing. So then it works in two ways. The first is to help prevent the displacement from happening at all, and the second, if the harassment does occur, that more permanently affordable housing will be created.
I think I certainly agree that that breaking the profit motive is part of what that signals. I guess the opposite concern is that it slows the market down to such an extent that the affordable units, that newly potential affordable units that could be created, which could help mitigate some of the displacement, would also be slowed down as a result. What's the thought, your thought or the coalition's thought on that point?
First of all, I think that I hope everyone agrees that it's better to do it right than to do it fast, and that's especially important when you're talking about building so much new housing in the community, and particularly affordable housing. Second of all, that is sort of a finer point within the overall idea of having anti-harassment, either legislation or zoning text, that could be addressed by the specificities of the proposal. So instead of every single landlord, every single type of permit, we could sort of think about what is the universe of landlords that have sort of indicators of bad behavior in the past that should have to go through this more rigorous process of approval, or are there certain types of permits that should rate this higher level of scrutiny? So some people who don't have indications of being bad actors and or who are doing relatively minor work, they wouldn't be put through this more rigorous process. But if there's reason to think this person's a bad actor, then the city would take a closer look before allowing them to proceed.
And if I could just follow up
Sure.
on the other proposal that the coalition has about the Good Neighbor Tax Credit. I know a little bit about that since that it was originally proposed by the Fifth Avenue Committee more than a decade ago. I'm just wondering, it's not really within the city's purview. So what would the ask be of the administration specific to the Good Neighbor Tax Credit?
So the first ask would, honestly, to slow down the process of the rezoning, and if it's not in the city's purview to do this, then there is some support for this idea at the state level to essentially throw the city's support behind that idea and try to get it passed at the state level, and to not proceed with this rezoning specifically before doing that. And the second is that the city could offer something like a rebate in lieu of it being a tax credit. It would essentially do the same thing, so someone would still be taxed, but then they would get a rebate from the city, so it would function to achieve the same goals. But again, given the enormous amount of unregulated housing in the community, I think it's extremely dangerous for the city to just forge ahead. And when people ask, what about tenants in the small homes? Like, what about people who can't be protected by the legal services? Because that was actually another point I wanted to make, is that the legal services are really important for tenants who have the right to say and they have the right to lease renewals. They're not going to work that well for tenants where the landlord is just going to say, you know what, now I'm going to triple your rent or goodbye. A lawyer can't really help with that situation. So that's a reason to, if this is a community where the city is looking at it and saying, well, there is a huge amount of unregulated housing, and gee, it's going to be really hard to keep people in their homes, then maybe that should be a community that is not on the list of areas that are going to be rezoned if the city can't figure it out.
So you would say, despite the fact that we see the rent pressures that exist today and continue to cause rents to go up, the city, absent the ability to regulate rents, which it can't do in the smaller homes today, should not proceed basically at all. To create housing that's sorely needed in East New York and throughout the city.
We are very much in favor of the creation of affordable housing, as is the whole coalition and many people in this room. So we're not suggesting that everything should stop. I am suggesting that doing a dramatic upzoning that will seek to 50% increase the population in the community, with a relatively small percentage of that as being guaranteed permanently affordable doesn't necessarily make sense. And if the city did a more modest upzoning now, so for instance, HPD is saying that they want to create 3,500 units of affordable housing, so it's not really clear to me why they're doing an upzoning that will allow twice that number of new units. But if the city wants to ensure that it has an ongoing role and is able to continue to work out proposals going forward that make sense with the market conditions, that will change. And HPD has acknowledged that developers will be much more likely to take the subsidies at the beginning of this process. So they're talking as though we're thinking about a 5 to 10 year process. People who have lived in this community for 40 years and who want their children to grow up there are not talking about a 5 to 10 year process, but if you give away the store at the beginning, then it becomes very hard to renegotiate the deal later on once the market has changed.
The subsidies that HPD provides when it does do affordable housing is for a lot longer than 5 or 10 years.
Yes,
it's for in the range of the 40 years you're talking about.
So the coalition has asked that so first of all, yes, I agree, and that's incredibly important to guarantee long-term, if not permanent, affordability. What I was referring to is that people will not continue to take the HPD subsidies as the market in in East New York becomes stronger. So that those subsidies are desirable as long as Commissioner Bean pointed out, it's not financially feasible to develop without them, but the market may very well change more quickly than, first of all, as to my knowledge, the city hasn't hazarded a guess as to when developers will stop being interested in receiving the HPD subsidies. They haven't said, based on our financial modeling, we think that in 7 years, people aren't going to be as likely to take these subsidies anymore. So that would certainly be helpful information for people to know, because right now, the city has only essentially said, we're going to try to get people to take subsidies. They will want to take them at the beginning. But what about 5 years from now? The community still will have been very dramatically upzoned, and we don't really have information about, are people going to still want the subsidies 5 years from now, or even 15 years from now, which may fall outside of the DEIS scope, but again is extremely relevant for this community when the upzoning that you're talking about will still be in place 15 years from now.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Levin and then Ms. Ortiz.
First, I want to thank you very much for your impassioned and articulate advocacy. It's this kind of advocacy that makes these processes work, and regardless of what happens, it will be better because you've given so much thought to putting the very careful arguments together. I'd just like to ask you factually about the anti-harassment provision that you're pushing for. As you know, it was put in place in the Special Clinton District in 1974, so there's a long record of its effectiveness there, and I think there, because it's my neighborhood, it has done exactly what you described. It helped keep neighbors in place, it helped preserve buildings, and it's a significant disincentive to landlords who do bad things, but it doesn't seem to have been a deterrent against continued improvement of the neighborhood. We've kept neighbors in their residences and in the neighborhoods, and it's made for a better neighborhood overall. Just as a point of information, do you have any experience in Greenpoint, Williamsburg? It only went into effect in 2005. I wonder if the Urban Justice Center or anybody else has any experience about how it has played out in that rezoning area.
I don't have specific numbers. I can say that, like, frankly, it didn't work as well as in the Special Clinton District, but in part that was because the area that was rezoned just wasn't large enough, so it didn't cover the whole community in the way that it does in the Special Clinton District. That is why Urban Justice Center and many others are advocating to have those sort of protections in place citywide, not only in rezoned communities, but for this rezoning, at the very least, the city should put this in place in every single neighborhood rezoning that it's starting with going ahead. And again, even if the percentage of rent-stabilized units in East New York is relatively small compared to the total, you're still talking about 3,000 units, which when HPD is coming up and saying we're going to build 1,200 units, we're aiming to get 3,500 units, it's not clear to me why the 3,000 rent-stabilized units are being talked about as though that's a completely irrelevant source of affordable housing when it's a source that exists today that could be protected more.
Yeah, if you keep what you have, you're much better off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you. Asked and answered. Asked and answered.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Paula Crespo. Welcome, Ms. Crespo.
Thank you. Good afternoon, City Planning Commission. I'm Paula Crespo. I'm a planner at the Pratt Center for Community Development. We're one of several technical assistance providers for the coalition. The community resources and facilities that exist in East New York today, things like schools, child care centers, spaces for youth, et cetera, they're at capacity and they're not sufficient in number to meet the needs of the current population. We all know that this rezoning is designed to lead to housing for tens of thousands of new residents in the neighborhood, but there's nothing in the plan that outlines a strategy or a policy to ensure that as these new residents come to East New York, that there will be a sufficient amount of community facilities for them. Community facilities are essential ingredients for healthy, sustainable places to live. And we can't just naively assume that enough of them will be built to meet the needs of a growing community. Therefore, provisions should be established in the zoning to ensure that commitments to build needed infrastructure, amenities, and space for community facilities are binding and will be fulfilled over the multi-year course of the residential build-out. We ask that the city consider mapping a special area-wide zoning tool onto the rezoning area to accomplish this goal. Such a tool could include, but isn't limited to, a special purpose district or a newly designated density growth management area, so that developers of housing over a certain size are required to set aside additional FAR for the creation of community facilities. Alternatively, the city could add easement and certification requirements directly into the zoning text chapters. The key point here is not about the particular zoning tool, but rather the concept that the development of community facilities should be codified into the zoning. Since the city is deploying zoning as a tool to meet its ambitious housing creation goals, it should also be using zoning to deliver the community facilities that existing and new residents will need. This is not a radical or a new idea. There is ample precedent in the city for using zoning to privilege or even to mandate very specific desired uses. For example, some regulations require the creation of specific public spaces or mandate easements to allow for future construction by public entities. I will submit a memo that describes many of these precedents as part of my testimony. Finally, we also recommend that the city use a tool called a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes to create a dedicated fund to pay for the construction of these community facilities. As a technical assistance provider to the coalition, I strongly urge the city to genuinely and meaningfully consider using the power of zoning to ensure that the build-out of community facilities keeps up with the significant increase in population that this rezoning is intended to spur. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crespo. Questions? Ms. Dela Luz, then Ms. Ortiz.
Paula, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you for being here and for the Pratt Center's work on this important effort. I'm just wondering, the pilot idea has certainly come up, not just here, but in other areas. I think the question I have really, if you could elaborate more on the pilot idea, especially since right now there's, I think, a question about values and whether or not they'd be a significant enough source to be a contributing factor into the pilot that would then generate what it is everybody desires. So if you could talk a little bit about that and how that would work in East New York in particular.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point about, the level of revenue that may be generated by an increase in property taxes. But I think the important part to keep in mind is that a pilot ensures that this increase in property taxes and the revenue it creates, that it stays in East New York, right? That it doesn't go to the general coffers of the city. So that there's a kind of a dedicated fund, albeit the challenges of that, it may not be high enough, but that there's a dedicated fund that ensures that the increase in revenue goes to pay for community facilities in East New York.
Could you talk a little bit, and maybe your